It was the first real break I'd had all year, the first chance to return home from college after a brutal semester filled with exams, late nights, and cafeteria food that could be legally classified as inedible, and I couldn't have been more excited to get back to my parents' quiet suburban neighborhood, a pristine little cul-de-sac in the middle of a county that prided itself on clean sidewalks, trimmed lawns, and a ridiculous level of order enforced by the infamous Homeowners Association, the dreaded HOA, which, as I would soon discover, had somehow mutated from a neighborhood committee into a full-blown power-hungry dictatorship. I drove up in my old, slightly beat-up silver Honda Civic, the one that had carried me through high school, summer jobs, and now college. Its paint a bit faded, and a couple dings on the bumper but otherwise reliable, and as I reached the security gate of my parents' community, a uniformed guard stepped forward, expression stern, clipboard in hand. Thinking he was just going to wave me in, or maybe check my ID, I rolled down the window with a smile, expecting a quick welcome. Instead, he handed me a piece of paper without a word, then stepped back. I glanced down, confused, and read, "Notice of entry denial. This vehicle does not meet the community aesthetic code. Driver is not approved by HOA for extended visits. Entry denied." I blinked, thinking it had to be a mistake, some kind of prank or joke. But the guard just pointed to a sign that had apparently been added since the last time I visited. Guest vehicles must be pre-approved by the HOA. No entry without valid authorization. My jaw dropped. I called my mom, told her what happened, and she immediately drove up to the gate to get me, furious. After a heated argument with the guard and a call to the HOA office, they allowed me to come in for 24 hours as a courtesy. But they made it clear that if I stayed longer, my parents would be fined $500 per day and my car would be towed. I couldn't believe it. I had lived there for years, helped mow lawns, pulled weeds, shoveled snow from the community sidewalk, and now I was being treated like a trespasser because of a car. When we got back to the house, my dad was already at the dining room table, reading through some paperwork he had just pulled off the printer. He was calm to calm, and when my mom stormed in behind me, waving the denial notice, he simply said, "Let them talk. Let them write. Let's see if they understand what they've started." At first I thought he meant he was going to call someone or maybe write an angry letter. But then he opened a binder from his office, thick, leather-bound, filled with local statutes, case law, HOA regulations, and court precedents, and I remembered something important that the HOA apparently didn't know. My dad wasn't just a retired lawyer. He was a sitting judge, one of the longest-serving, most respected judges in the county, and when it came to matters of law, especially property law, he was an expert with a reputation for being relentless when he saw injustice. Over dinner, he asked me every detail, the way the notice was written, who handed it to me, the signage at the gate, how the security guard behaved, the exact wording used on the HOA's policy site. He took notes, cross-referenced their bylaws, and calmly informed us that the HOA had violated no less than 5 state statutes and 2 federal housing regulations, including potential discrimination based on vehicle appearance and arbitrary guest access denial without due process. The next day, while I tried to relax and enjoy time with my family, the HOA sent an official letter to our mailbox certified, no less warning that my continued presence would trigger a fine of $500 per day, effective immediately. My dad read it, made a copy, smiled faintly, and said, "Perfect." Over the next several days, I watched as he gathered everything, copies of the HOA's declarations, board meeting notes, vehicle code standards, and communications with other homeowners, many of whom, when my dad discreetly called or emailed them, admitted they had faced similar ridiculous rules or threats, but had been too intimidated to fight back. One neighbor, a retired veteran, told us they fined him for flying a small American flag from his porch because it was not HOA-approved material. Another young couple said they were fined for chalk drawings on their driveway their kids had made. A single mom down the street had been told her mailbox was too faded and had to be replaced or face daily penalties. It was clear this HOA wasn't about community, it was about control. My dad compiled their testimonies, documented each complaint, and drafted a formal complaint with the county's housing authority, but that wasn't all. He also began preparing a lawsuit, not just against the HOA itself, but personally naming the board president, a woman named Karen Whitmore, who had apparently been the driving force behind these absurd enforcement campaigns. According to neighbors, she was known as the dictator with a clipboard, patrolling the neighborhood every morning, measuring grass height, peeking into driveways, and calling in citations for any offense, real or imagined. She had, according to one neighbor, taken issue with my father's occasional habit of parking in front of our own house instead of the garage, claiming it disrupted the symmetry of the street. Once, she even told my mom her holiday wreath was too large and seasonally aggressive. These weren't rules, they were weapons used by a petty tyrant. A few days later, the HOA held an emergency board meeting, supposedly closed to non-members, but word got out that it was to discuss unauthorized guests and legal challenges. So my dad and I parked down the street and walked over. Arriving just as Karen tried to shut the doors, my dad introduced himself, calmly and firmly. As a resident and legal representative of an aggrieved party, Meehan requested entry under the HOA's own bylaws, which he quoted aloud. Karen tried to argue, but he pulled out a printed copy of the HOA charter, which, embarrassingly for her, confirmed his right to attend. Inside, he listened quietly as she and the board spun their story, claiming that I had been loitering, that my car was abandoned, and that my presence upset the aesthetic cohesion of the community. When they were done, my father stood, addressed the entire room, and in a calm, measured tone, laid out every legal violation the HOA had committed, line by line, complete with citations, case law, and potential fines they would be facing. The room went silent. Karen flushed red. One board member even left early. My dad didn't threaten. He simply informed. And then he said, "You may wish to consult your own counsel. You'll be hearing from mine." That night, the first copy of the lawsuit was delivered via courier to Karen's home. A thick stack of papers outlining claims of discrimination, abuse of authority, and violations of housing law. By the following week, the story had spread, not just in the neighborhood, but to local news. Thanks to a friendly reporter who picked up the court filing and saw the potential headline, "Judge's son banned by HOA lawsuit explodes," in wealthy suburb, cameras showed up. Karen tried to hide. My dad gave a short, professional statement about defending civil rights and ensuring justice. The HOA scrambled to issue a clarification about their policy, but it was too late. The county housing authority opened its own investigation, and several homeowners joined our lawsuit in a class action format. What began as a ban on me visiting my own family was now a legal firestorm, and while my father remained calm and professional through it all, I could see it in his eyes. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about principle. They had poked the wrong family, they had disrespected the law in the presence of a man who wrote it, and though they didn't know it yet, their little reign of power was about to end permanently. The judge had entered the neighborhood, and Chapter 2 of our story would be written not on paper, but in court. From the moment the lawsuit was filed, it was as if a sleeping storm had been awakened in the neighborhood, one that had long been simmering beneath the surface. A slow boil of frustration, fear, and resentment that dozens of homeowners had felt, but never dared to speak aloud until now, when one man, my father, had thrown a legal spear straight through the thick armor of the HOA's unchecked authority, sending ripples of panic through its board, and finally giving voice to a community that had been silenced far too long. In the days following the initial legal filings, the HOA scrambled to mount a defense, hiring a high-priced attorney from a local firm known for aggressively defending corporations against regulatory complaints. But what they failed to understand, and what Karen Whitmore, the clipboard queen herself, refused to acknowledge, was that this was not just a civil matter about guest rules or car aesthetics. This was a systemic legal unraveling built on a foundation of case law, community rights, and government codes that had been repeatedly ignored, twisted, and weaponized by a committee of neighborhood authoritarians who operated less like caretakers and more like a private militia of petty tyrants. As the court date approached, media attention intensified. The local news featured our family in a respectful piece titled "When HOA Power Goes Too Far," where my father, in his signature navy blue suit and tie, calmly outlined the abuse of authority at play, how community rules, meant to protect shared property, had become tools of selective enforcement, discrimination, and harassment. Former HOA members, now emboldened, began contacting us with stories that could fill novels. A disabled veteran whose ramp was labeled an eyes